I mean, I think there's a large portion of people who go into this industry because they think it's about the money, and
Mm.
it's not about the money at all. I mean, for me,
Mhm.
I wish it were, but it's not. It's about the people. And
Mhm.
when you ask me what really transitioned me, I was saving lives in an emergency room. I'm still saving lives. I just do it differently.
Welcome to the Beauty Talk podcast, where we feature how the best medical practitioners help their patients to look better, younger, and healthier. Now, enjoy the show, and here's your host.
Daniel Gao here. I'm the host of Beauty Talk. We feature the top medical practitioners in health and beauty, both inside and out. I have Halle Friedman, founder of Robert Andrews Laser and Medical Aesthetics in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This was founded in 2013, but before that, at the age of 18, Halle entered the United States Air Force, where she served her country for over 20 years in both active duty and as a reservist. During her time in the Air Force, she became a computer operations instructor and received her Bachelor's of Science in Nursing from the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. She also became a commissioned officer at this time and began her career as an emergency and battlefield nurse. She's been a nurse for over 26 years and has also been an operations manager for several emergency rooms and also a reservist battlefield nurse for over 20 years. She has extensive leadership experience and has worked directly in support of the Air Force Surgeon General in Washington, D.C. Halle is proficient in bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, ablative and non-ablative laser skin resurfacing, sclerotherapy, advanced Botox, dermal fillers, and more. So, Halle, welcome and good to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much.
Yes, I'm curious, what got you interested in medicine in the first place? Let's start there.
I was raised by a physician who was a surgeon,
Mm.
and we lived in a really tiny town next to Canada, and he was the
Mhm.
only physician in like a 60-mile area. So as a little girl, I would go to his office. He had a little hospital up there, and he'd take me on house calls all the time.
Oh,
So I
wow.
was always actively involved with medicine from the time I was a little girl.
Oh, man. So your experience goes even further back than that.
Yeah, much further back.
Okay, got it. So, in your introduction, you talked a little bit about how you were in the Air Force, you served there in medicine, but what was that transition into aesthetics? I guess what got you interested in aesthetics to want to make that switch over?
Initially, I think at a very young age, I always was into beauty. And so I'd sold Mary Kay while I was in the Air Force, and I was still doing computers. And then when I became a nurse and I started working in ERs, I went into some other skincare lines and makeup lines and health and nutrition. It was always a huge interest of mine.
Mm.
And so I seemed to have a natural, and I'd always take care of my patients. I mean, even aesthetically speaking in the ER, I just seemed to be kind of a thing I would like to do.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, I got really good with needles, a lot of years with needles, a lot of years with doing different procedures, and aesthetics just kind of fell right into it.
Okay. And so you have your own practice. You've had it now for about 12 years or so.
Mhm.
So what prompted you to want to start your own practice? I mean, why not just work for a plastic surgeon office or a med spa? Like, what really made you want to start your own?
I would say when I went to school for aesthetics, I went and took the medical director course, and I wanted to know all the ins and outs on how the operations, the whole entire practice worked. So I used to do operations in emergency departments, and when I did this Air Force Surgeon General's office, it was all about processes and procedures in addition to medicine and bringing it together. So after working and being an operations manager in ERs, I was working with a lot of physicians, and what I realized is they really didn't want to own the practices. They wanted MBAs and people with, I have an MBA, and they wanted somebody who had more of a business background doing it. So they were looking for jobs just as much as nurses look for jobs, which is
Mhm.
always interesting. Everybody thinks a physician wants to have their own practice, like my dad.
Mhm.
They do not. They really do not. They want to be employees. So
Mhm.
in regards to that, it's just the whole back end, my background in the military, in computers, business, it all kind of made more sense that I would actually start the practice. And so I recruited a physician, and that's how I started. But I was not initially intending on doing the procedures as much as I have.
Mhm.
I was going to run the practice. And then, yeah, I had a few nurses call out a few different times, and I was trained and I'd done all the training, and I kept going into the room, and then the patients kept requesting me. So
Okay.
That's where we're at.
There you go. Okay. So now that you have your practice, what are some of the most common treatments that your clients come to you for?
Well, number one is Botox, without question, whether
Mhm.
it's for migraines, whether it's for aesthetics, whether or not it's for trigger point injections. Botox is definitely the main, I would say, consumable that we go through in my practice. Laser's always awesome, and so are fillers and everything else, health and nutrition. But the basically the feeder that brings everybody in is always Botox.
Okay. And you did mention something about migraines. So I've only heard this from one other person before, but I don't think most people know about this. If you have migraines, Botox can actually help you relieve migraines. That was my understanding. Is that correct?
It's correct.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it's muscular movement. So the actual brain itself doesn't have any nerves. So most people think it's affiliated with the brain, but it's not. It's affiliated with all the muscles and the skeletal system around it. So what a lot of times what happens with migraines is the muscles will tense up and they keep, buckling up in one location, and then it can radiate to different parts of our head, whether it's our temples, whether it's the back of our head, whether it's mid forehead, but it's also almost 100% muscular related. So, in regards to that, when you relax the muscles, you can reduce the headaches. So
Okay.
it's the muscles that are contracting that creates the headache.
Got it. Okay. So then if people are suffering from migraines, is this something that's more of a chronic condition and books can really help them? Or if it's like, oh, I have a migraine, I should go get Botox right now.
No, usually people who have migraines are people it's develops over time. It's either they get them all the time and they've gotten them for a long, long time and they
Mhm.
just don't know how to get relief other than medications, shots, sometimes going to the ERs.
Mhm.
And so it's usually not a one and done. I mean, now if it's some people will have trigger points just from working out and they may have a knot or something that's triggering it up to their neck. You
Mhm.
can do that one time, relax that muscle, and sometimes that will never come back. So
Mhm.
if you can have incidental migraines, but that's usually not your first treatment of choice.
Okay. So, but if it is more chronic, then this could be a really good solution for people that
Oh,
suffer from chronic migraines.
without question.
Okay, got it. Now, you mentioned that Botox is really, for migraine specifically, is relaxing the muscles. Now, I think most people think about Botox as freezing the muscles. So could you clarify that as why people think it's freezing, but in reality it's relaxing?
So scientifically speaking, there are synapses at the end of all of our nerves that touch our muscles. So every nerve touches a muscle. Botox, basically what it does is it kills off those synapses at the end and then they rejuvenate. So what happens when those synapses is those muscles aren't able to contract. So when they're not being touched and contracting, they're just going to relax. They just soften. So when people notice they don't have wrinkles anymore, like let's say, for instance, on the frontalis muscle in the forehead, it's not because that's lifting, it's because that muscle is relaxing. When it relaxes, your skin lifts, everything lifts with it.
Hmm.
So it does the opposite. It's really odd when you first start understanding it. When I try to
Yeah.
explain it to my
Mhm.
patients, even these guys, I mean, their whole purpose is to close our eyes. When we put Botox in it, it relaxes these muscles. So now they're not able to do the same, it depends on where we're going. It's not obviously our eyelid, but regarding this, it's to protect our eyes. Now we can't do that. And the only thing they can do is relax and the skin and everything lifts.
Okay. So if it's relaxing, I guess the freezing perception that people have of freezing is that they just can't move the muscles anymore. And so that's why they think it's frozen because they can't move it. But
Yeah, and
it
that's
is
because
so
the nerves
relaxed.
aren't talking to the muscle. And so what
Mm,
happens every 3 months, those synapses nerves regenerate is one of our, one thing that regenerates in our body continuously is nerves.
mm,
And some take longer, but those little tiny things at the very end that touch the nerves, those things, they'll reproduce and they regenerate within 3 to 4 months. And
okay.
that's when you start getting movement again.
Got it.
Yeah, so it does freeze it potentially. I mean,
Mhm,
hypothetically, it freezes it because you
mhm.
can't move it.
Yeah.
But that's just because, yeah, the nerves aren't talking to it.
Okay. Now, I want to also dive into the skin resurfacing treatments that you provide. So, could you explain what is skin resurfacing? Because I think people heard of like lasers and you've heard of these things like with collagen and all that, but what exactly is skin resurfacing?
So, resurfacing, I'll just get into I like to get into anatomy and
Mhm.
physiology. First and foremost, skin is our biggest organ in our entire body, and it's considered an organ, just like our heart is our cardiovascular system. And so it's an organ. And with resurfacing, you can do it anywhere on your body. But what happens is the elements of the sun, just day-to-day wind, living life, we start getting wrinkles. Our skin gets rougher. It's exposed constantly, and it's our biggest protective barrier.
Hmm.
So when we start aging, it's because it's almost like if you're sanding a table, and you're sanding some wood and it has chipped up old paint on it. That's kind of hypothetically what our skin's doing as we age. It's just getting old, it's cracking. And
Hmm.
what resurfacing does is the laser, and it puts energy into the skin. Some of it will actually remove layers of the skin, depending on the depth. Some of it will do continuously. Some of it does it more like a cheesecloth and kind of in a fractional check mark kind of. But what it does, or pattern, but what it does is it forces our skin to heal. And when it's a
Hmm.
controlled injury, when we resurface, we'll take a laser, we go all over the skin, depending upon the area that you're wanting, and we cover it very, very thoroughly to where you're going to be red. Sometimes, depending on the laser, you might have some scabbing, and then your skin's going to heal. And once it heals, it's new skin, it's fresh skin, and it's more rejuvenated skin. So that's kind of what happens. And then also as it heals, it's considered a controlled injury. If we get like in a bike accident, we're mountain
Hmm.
biking and we wipe out and we have a big scab or something, hypothetically, that's an uncontrolled injury, that is. And so our body doesn't have any type of education on how to heal. What this does is being controlled, it takes away skin in exactly where it's supposed to, and then it will just close up and heal, and you get tighter skin.
Okay.
So
So
it's producing elastin, collagen, and all that stuff.
I see. So that's all involved within that healing process.
Yep, it's all of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So when it comes to so the entire process of skin resurfacing is really just I'll call it damaging the skin in an effort to get it to heal even better after that, correct?
correct. Yep.
Okay. And so then when it comes to the lasers, then, so I know there's a lot of different lasers out there, there's a lot of different treatments out there. In effect, are all the laser treatments basically burning the skin so that it can heal, or do some of these lasers have different methods of, I guess, damaging or removing that outer damaged layer?
There's different types of technology out there. So IPL, which is intense pulse light, is a light-based energy. So it
Mm-hmm.
is not resurfacing. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually emitting light. It's more of it's a different type of technology, and there are 5 layers of skin, and it depending upon the settings on the laser is going to determine how wide, how deep it goes, and it will go into those 5 layers. And by just I guess just upsetting the cellular content and just disrupting it will force us to push some of it like brown spots,
Mm-hmm.
and so some people have brown spots, some of them are just superficial veins, and
Mm-hmm.
those do not resurface, but they either occlude or they are going to break it up at a deeper level to where your body just eliminates it.
Interesting. Okay. So with all these different lasers, basically my understanding is that there's different energy levels depending on the laser, and it could do different things. So if someone was thinking about all these laser treatments and thinking, okay, there's so many out there, which ones do I choose? Is it more that a particular type of laser is going to be good in a particular situation? Like if you mentioned like the sunspots, or if you have the veins and use a different one, or if it just overall you have skin laxity and you want to tighten it, then it's something different. Is that kind of how it works?
That's kind of how it works.
Okay.
And so some go toward pigment. So the technology that goes for laser hair removal and brown spots are the same technology, just different energy levels.
Hmm.
So that's why all skin types can do hair removal. So that's, from your most fair to your very darkest skin type can do hair removal because it goes to a deeper level to the follicle of that hair where it's not doing superficial.
Hmm.
Whereas IPL, you cannot do all skin types because that's more of a superficial laser and it's going
Hmm.
to like the top 2 layers.
Hmm.
So then it can disrupt pigment.
I see. Okay. And
And
so,
then some, yeah, definitely some have needles. Some of them, like R frequency, which is radio frequency, those have needles that emit deeper, but you don't really have a lot of downtime. You don't
mm,
see like it's not burning off like a CO2 off your skin off the top,
mm,
but it goes down, it pokes holes, and then it emits energy. The cells get all excited and want to heal, and then they come together. But you look good when you're leaving for the most part.
got it. Okay. And now I want to introduce the chemical peels. So chemical peels, I'd like to understand kind of what does chemical peels do, number one, and then how do they compare to some of these laser treatments that we were just talking about?
So chemical peels are always wonderful. So for people who have melasma, melasma is a hormone produced condition. Eye peels cannot work with them
Mm,
because all that heat and that light does is stimulate the response of the melasma and it creates more pigment. So chemical peels become actually really they come in handy because they're not emitting heat nor are they emitting light, but they can still remove that top layer of skin. And so what happens is it just depends on what's in the chemical peel. Some of them are acids, some of them are, they're all kind of in the acid family. And so they'll go very superficial or they can go much deeper.
mhm.
But if they're going deeper, you just have to make sure whoever's doing them is really careful with them because you can cause a lot of problems with chemical lasers and chemical peels.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but the chemical peel, it's a top layer. It
Mhm.
usually sits on for a couple days, or it burns it initially, but it takes several days to peel it. And it's
Mhm.
still a healthy way to get rid of it. It's not like a sunburn where it
Yeah.
really damages
Mhm.
uncontrollably, and then you peel.
Okay. So the chemical peels, you basically put it on, you let it sit there, and then over time you're going to peel. But typically when people come in for chemical peels, it's just they come in once, they get it done, and then they don't have to worry about any kind of follow-up treatment aside from just getting it refreshed. But it's
Typically, yep.
okay.
Yep. And the same thing with lasers. Lasers usually don't have a lot of downtime unless it's like a CO2. So there are different levels of lasers. Some go more superficial, some go super deep. And
Mm.
once again, we're talking about 5 layers of skin. So we're addressing different skin conditions. And the deeper they go, the deeper wrinkles they go after.
Okay. So as far as the end result, then, chemical peels could be put into the same family as the lasers. It's just a different type of modality of how it's being applied. Would you say that I'm
Pretty much, yeah.
correct?
It's
Okay.
even like microdermabrasion. I mean, we do microdermabrasion, we do microneedling.
Mhm.
It's just all the level. I mean, microdermabrasion is like buffing the skin, right? It still
Mhm.
gets rid of some cells. It makes your skin look really hydrated and pretty when you first get it done,
Mhm.
but it's not as deep as the chemical peel. Then after the chemical peel, you can go deeper, and that's where we get into the lasers.
I see. Okay. Now, when it comes to common misconceptions, I'm sure that we talked about a couple different treatments, and I'm sure you hear a lot of different things from your clients. What would you say are some of the most common misconceptions or myths that your clients ask you the most about?
Well, first up, Botox is probably the thing that scares them the most. So they think it's a toxin, it's a poison. So some people
Mm.
will come in, they'll laser, they'll do fillers, which I always find is actually more risky than Botox. They'll do those because they think they're safer because they're hyaluronic acid versus Botox because they're terrified of Botox. They think what it's just because of the botulism toxin.
Mhm.
We all heard about eating the can of green beans and people dying. That probably, or not probably with younger generations, they've not heard about that. But when they used to
Mhm.
can goods, that was a big problem, and that was botulism toxin. So
Hmm.
that's a big myth because the amount of units it takes of botulism toxin to actually cause a problem in the human body, like nausea, vomiting, poisonous, some type of reaction like that, usually is like 100,000 units to 200,000 units, where the average person might get 40 units. So
Oh,
that's,
okay.
it's very, very localized.
Yeah. You'd have to be very intentional trying to poison yourself at that
Yeah,
rate.
with Botox.
Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to move. Nothing would move.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
Botox, so there's the toxin part of that. What about some of the other common misconceptions about any of your treatments, just the ones that come to mind,
Um, Misconceptions.
or myths that you hear?
I would say filler, like filler. I hear a lot of times it stretches out your face.
Mm,
And that depends on how much you use. If
mm,
somebody's doing a ton of filler, yeah, potentially could that happen? Potentially if it's in there for a long time, but that would take an excessive amount.
mm,
Where one syringe of filler in people's lips, like in Colorado, we're so arid here that
mm,
that one syringe of filler brings moisture to our lips. So one syringe is not going to stretch out your lips. It's just replacing the volume that you've already lost. So whatever you already had has already been stretched out. The
mm,
same thing goes if you do it in your cheeks or anywhere else. And that's another myth I hear often.
okay. So, Hallie, when it comes to your approach to educating your clients on the treatments, the benefits, how do you approach that educational part of it? Because I'm sure, like we kind of talked about the misconceptions, people come in, they think they need something when in reality they need something else, or they come in, they just have no idea what they need. Like, how do you approach that educational component of it?
Well, I would say the first thing I do with anything, just because of the nature of the business, is I have to establish trust,
Mm.
because everybody's a doubter when they walk in, right? They're going to doubt whether or not you know where to put the Botox. A lot of times they'll show me, and I've injected thousands upon thousands of times, but that fear when they first walk in, but then to educate them on what the muscles do, why they might have dropped. I mean, a lot of people think Botox drops their face, right? Their eyebrows. What they don't realize is it's just an imbalance of the Botox. So a lot of injectors, they may or may not know this, but if you have too much Botox in one set of muscles and not enough in the other, it's going to get heavy.
Mm.
So it's all a balancing and all the muscles work together.
Mhm.
So I talk about that and I describe them. I educate them on it. I educate them on the vessels and when occlusions can happen with like filler. That's a scary thing for a lot of people, is to educate them why this isn't going to happen with you when I'm doing it. And so how do I approach it is initially just establish rapport with my patients so that they have some type of basic trust. And then I'll ask them a lot of questions because sometimes they think, a lot of times, let's say hypothetically, or happens often, women think they need filler right here.
Mhm.
And that is not where you want to put filler 90% of the time. It's going to close them off. It's going to make them look more primate. The problem is their skin, it's falling from back here and it's falling into their face. So I'll give them a mirror and I pick up their face and I move it and I have them look and I have them squeeze and animate. And it just depends on where they're at and I'll just educate them about it. So I think being educated yourself helps you educate your patient. So make sure you know the content of what you're talking about.
Okay. I think you brought up a really good point. I didn't even know this part of it. If you have too much Botox in a certain area, the weight of it will actually drop down. I never would have thought that if you put too much somewhere, the weight of it would cause the face to not be disfigured, but just get you a result you would have never thought.
Yeah, and some muscles are elevator muscles and some are depressor muscles. So some are meant to drop and
Mhm.
frown, like the frowning muscles. Some are made to lift, right? So you have to know the difference because whatever you do with your Botox, whatever muscle, you need to know where the muscles are. And then you need to understand what those muscles do because if you put it in the wrong muscle, you put it in a lifting muscle, you're going to drop somebody. If you put it in a depressing muscle, like when people frown, those are great ones because you can kind of turn their frown upside down.
Oh, wow.
You yeah.
Mm.
But
Okay.
this is the biggest misconception is the forehead.
Mm.
And that's always 99% of the time because of an imbalance of Botox.
Mm.
And
Okay.
all I do is if they're heavy through here and they get heavy in their eyes, we just add more in the middle because those will lift them back up.
Interesting. So it's almost
Mhm.
like a like an equation. You put more here, it'll have more here. You put less here, it'll have less here. I never had
Yep.
anyone explain it like that before.
Well, and new injectors don't get taught that in school. And I
Yeah.
realize that when I train injectors, I
Mhm.
do teach them that because they never taught me that. And
Mhm.
it took me a little bit to wrap my arms around it. I would watch it and then I was like, okay, how do I fix this? And everything you do sometimes is not what you do. If you have an eye lifting, you're not going to necessarily go and drop it. So, you just have to balance that muscle.
Okay. So let's say that someone is looking to get some type of aesthetic treatment done, but doesn't know which provider to go to. What would be the most important piece of advice you would give to that person to find that right provider who knows their stuff, who's good, who can really take care of them?
Um, Obviously reviews have a lot to do with it, and you have to, that's a weighted, and everybody gets a bad review. So everybody has to be able to look at that and say, okay, how is that provider? Are they educating? What are they doing with that review? If it's something that, like that. Second off, I would always go for somebody with experience. I'd want to know their education and background
Mm.
before, for anybody who's sticking needles in my face. And that's because you can mess things up in the face. I make it sound really simple because I've done it
Mhm.
often and I've studied it. But for people who haven't and aren't familiar with it, just because it's cheap doesn't make it better. And
Mm.
and people need to be careful with that. I wouldn't go for the price necessarily as I go for the experience. If you can get a cheaper price and experience, that's a win-win all around.
Yeah. And I'd like you to dive a little bit deeper into that price point about it, because I think you bring up a very important point is that you don't necessarily want to go for the cheapest person because they may lack that experience. So, but I think what some people don't realize is what is the potential consequences of going to someone that doesn't have that experience. And so I think you mentioned the occlusion can happen, but I guess for the average person, what does an occlusion mean? I guess what is the negative consequences that could happen to someone if they go to someone who's not experienced or they're using product that's not legitimate or any of those non good products or experiences.
So, so with an occlusion, we'll just address that one first. So, filler is more of a jelly-like product. I mean, there are some that are thin that build a collagen or elastin, but they're not considered fillers. So, when I explain a filler, I'm always like, when you lose volume, it's like putting air in your tire, right? You have a flat tire, you're going to fill it back up. We have laxity, we've been laying our face for 40, 50 years, and after a while, our muscles are breaking down, our skin's breaking down. So, we want to plump it back up. That's filler. So anywhere you put filler, that means it's going to expand just like a sponge. So when you get a dry sponge, you add water to it, it expands. When we put filler in somebody, it's, dependent upon the type of filler, it's going to expand and give you that volume. It doesn't go in with the volume, but once it pulls water, because they all like to pull water out of our body, that's what gives them that volume. And so if you go in and you have an inexperienced injector and they don't do the proper safety. Like with fillers, you always aspirate. That means you pull the needle backwards to make sure you're not in a vessel. If someone's not doing that and they just go in like they're putting an IV in somebody and they happen to hit a vessel and they push that filler in there, that filler will expand right in that vessel. And now that vessel's not flowing right. So
Ooh,
there are products out there that you can reverse that. And every practitioner that has a practice of any sort should always have those, a bunch of it on hand.
okay. I've heard that if things are if it's being applied incorrectly, it can cause blindness.
Yep. And that's once again because of the vessels. So
Mm,
that's always scares people, but the likelihood of that happening is really, really low. It's just like anything else. When we go to get a procedure at a physician's office,
mm,
we all have to sign a consent. Why are
mm,
we signing a consent? Because something may happen. It's a liability.
mm,
I mean, but it can happen, and that's the truth. So
okay.
with yeah, with fillers and blindness, yeah, if it hits the wrong nerve, if it hits the wrong, and somebody doesn't know what they're doing, that's always something that you take in consideration when you go see an injector. And if you're
Okay.
doing price cutting and trying to go cheap, your risks are
Mm,
probably a little bit higher.
okay. So that's why you don't want to go to just the cheapest provider because they're the
Yeah.
cheapest.
Yeah, you want to, yeah, and everybody has to start out somewhere. I mean, I did too. I had to have my first year, but just be careful with, and when people can stick around and they still are around, usually it's telling them that they're doing a pretty good job at what they're doing.
Okay. Good to know then. Now, what role do you believe artists having that artistic eye, how important is that in what you do and how you approach your patient care?
I would, with me, I would say that's probably my biggest gift
Mm,
is the ability for symmetry in people's faces
mhm,
and understanding that faces are not symmetrical. None of our faces are, symmetrical totally. Most of us will favor one side of our face to sleep on. And even if we're sleeping on our stomach, we're turning our head, we're still sleeping on that same side. So symmetry and artistry go together. But and also being able to look at somebody and look at what their natural features might look like originally, because you don't want to change how somebody looks. I mean, there are people out there who want to change the way they look, and that's a whole different, that's not what I like to do for my patients. I like to look at them and keep them as natural as possible so that, and I'll ask them sometimes, hey, do you have a picture of when you're younger? Can I see what your cheeks looked like then? So
mhm,
when we're building it, what I always tell them is when you're a certain age, you don't want to all of a sudden put so much filler or so much Botox or do so much skin resurfacing that it looks really unnatural. So
mhm.
the better the artistry really comes in taking steps to get them to where they want to go and not doing it necessarily all at one time.
Okay. Now, Halle, I'm sure that I mean, you've been in practice and you've had a lot of experience. Is there maybe one case or one story that comes to mind, a memorable one or a challenging case, and how you were able to get them a successful outcome in the end?
That's a difficult one. I could tell you a bunch when I worked in the ER,
Mm,
but I've definitely in regards to, I mean, I've definitely developed people to where I've never really had a problem where we really totally had to resolve it because with this industry, either it works or it doesn't work,
mhm,
or something's it's really kind of black and white a lot. And so I would say that, I've definitely had some cases where I had people that had gone through, I mean, I have patients because I'm not just taking care of their beauty needs. I'm also touching them internally. And so I've had some who have been more emotionally distraught about where they were when they started coming to me and then where we got them to. And if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
I've had patients who lost their husbands and they felt like, I mean, they'd been out there for a couple of years, hadn't had or their wives, and they just feel their self-esteem is really low, really bad. They don't know what to go, and they'll come in. And usually they'll come in very heartfelt and very emotional too sometimes.
Mhm.
So it's starting out with them and like, if they're looking old and they feel like they look old, what I like to do is start in one location in just one area because dealing with somebody with their aesthetics also is an emotional thing for some people. So once again, building that trust and then bringing them back and continuing to add to it. I mean, I've definitely had situations with a plastic surgeon that maybe somebody wasn't happy with, and we changed out breast implants. But aside from that,
Mhm.
it's either black and white in this industry. Either they're happy or they're not happy.
Yeah. Well, I think you
Does
brought up a
that
good
make
point.
sense?
It does. I think you brought up a good point about that, though, is that this is I think, the hidden side to many people of the aesthetics industry. It's not just about the vanity portion of it, it's just helping people get their confidence back or
Yeah.
helping them feel like the best version of themselves. It's almost never about someone coming in. It's like, oh, I want to look better than everybody else. It's just, I just want to feel good. I just want to
Yeah.
feel like I'm attractive to myself.
Well, and some people really, I mean, I think there's a large portion of people who go into this industry because they think it's about the money. And
Mm.
it's not about the money at all. I mean, for me,
Mhm.
I wish it were, but it's not. It's about the people. And
Mhm.
when you ask me what really transitioned me, I was saving lives in an emergency room. I'm still saving lives. I just do it differently. I mean, I've had women who have been abused. I've had, you name it, the gamut out. And there are people who are identity, gender changing. And there's a lot of self-esteem that goes in there and developing that trust with them so that they're also you're safe with them. So even if they want to take an extreme, that you don't let them do that because just because somebody wants to jump off, jump off the cliff and do something extreme doesn't mean they necessarily have to, or nor is it really in their best interest at the time. So those relationships are huge in this industry.
Mm. Well said. Very well said. Now, Hallie, I'm curious, where do you think the future of aesthetics is going?
From what I'm seeing is I don't think private practices are going to be where we're at. And I'm seeing that a lot. I think it's going to be, there's a lot of big corporations out there buying up small practices or
Mm.
absorbing them because the aesthetics is an interesting, small practices struggle because the overhead is so great with those lasers. The lasers, I mean, if you're looking at somebody who has a laser, I would be looking at the technology. Some places have cheap lasers
Mm.
and some places have really, really well-made lasers. But in that industry, as an individual, as a private practice, buying those lasers, buying the products, buying everything seems like it's glamorous because they're charging so much, but the overhead and the employee, that's really difficult. And that's where private practices with physicians started disappearing, like my dad. Big companies started buying them up, and I think that's where we're going to be going. And then I think technology is going to advance because they'll have a lot more control over it. Right
Mm.
now, it's really loosey-goosey, and there's peptides out there. There's products
Mm.
coming in from all different countries, and the efficacy and the standardization, the safety are at question right now, as well as the control of the injectors. And I would say that they have not looked at this industry as seriously until most recently as they are now.
Mm. So you think there's gonna be some pretty big changes ahead then?
Oh, I think so. And I think regulatory reasons it's going to be cracked down on too, which is where it's advantageous. Although it's lovely to have a small practice and have that I mean, I started a number of years ago when we were in the beginning of doing this.
Hmm.
Now there's been such a plethora and different, modalities like hormone therapy that's added to it in different parts that there's some regulatory issues that are going to be needing to be managed
Okay. Well, I guess it's all for the safety of the client then, which is
for the
okay.
patients.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Now, for your practice, actually, I wanted to ask this question earlier, but I forgot. Where did the name Robert Andrews Laser and Medical Aesthetics name come from?
So that's always a question I always get asked. So I did not know what to name anything, and I didn't want to be named like everybody else. So I was looking all over, and I said, every city has a Genesis, every city has a Glow, every city has this. And I was like, what? And at the point in time when I first started, I really was looking at branding it and moving into different states. I found that this industry as an individual is harder to do. To do that takes a lot more effort than I thought. But
Hmm.
aside from that, I started researching names. So women's buying habits, number one. They buy double word male names in department stores. Michael Kors, Ralph Lauren, Vince Kimono. You go Paul Mitchell, double word male names. When you go through them, they sell. Not just to women, but to men.
Hmm.
Louis Vuitton, right? Once again, they're not always the male, but the first name usually is. And so that was what, women's buying habits. Always thought that was more high end. That was kind of fancy to have that double word male name. And then I researched names. Robert was the second most recognized name in the English language. Andrew was number 10. So I was like, oh, well, that's recognizable. It's rememberable. And then at the time I started, women, once again, in this industry, were going predominantly to male plastic surgeons, male doctors. So I was like, well, let me brand it with Robert Andrews and it can go anywhere. And yeah,
Makes a lot of sense.
yeah. So it's
Okay.
kind of odd, but they wouldn't have come to
Yeah.
Halle Dean's, right? They
Yeah.
would have thought it was a biscuit restaurant or
Yeah.
something.
So what is your vision for the practice? You mentioned a little bit about as far as like trying to get into other states, but like, what's your vision for the practice now?
Well, actually, what I have done is I've really grown my practice enough to where I'm actually talking to some other companies. That's why I know that about expanding and going into Washington State is kind of where I'm looking at next.
Hmm.
But they are looking to bring me on as part of their partnership.
Hmm.
Potentially
Hmm.
in a national company. And
Hmm.
so my initial one was just I had done plastic surgery. I'd done a lot with my practice. I'd grown extremely large, and then I decided to downsize because it has to be you have to be able to keep your arms around it.
Yeah.
And then what I realized was it's really hard for continuity, and you can't duplicate yourself, right? So when you're the one with all the talent, you can't, it's not expandable because your span of control is only so much and you can only
Mhm.
be in so many places. So within that, mine is to train people so they can do what I do in a safe and ethical way. And then, give them opportunity to give them ideas and even marketing, business plans, and development. I've definitely done a lot of that over the years.
Okay. Well, great vision then for the practice.
Yeah,
Now, I have one last question for you. Before I ask it, I do want to point people to your website at robertandrewsmedical.com.
that's
Now, last question for you is what does beauty mean to you?
beauty. I always said that beauty is from the inside out. I think people radiate from inside on who they are, their values, their morals, all anything that makes up a person, their compassion. And I find people, and so when I see people, I find almost everybody beautiful unless something else comes out. And so beauty to me is individual. And I think everybody holds something really beautiful about themselves. It's the ability for them to then to see it on the outside as much as maybe other people see it on the inside and bringing that forward. I mean, symmetry and aesthetically have a, visually be pleasing. That's always nice. But have one thing that really points out, and you can focus on, and that's beautiful in and of itself. So that's beauty to me. It's not just skin deep, it's definitely much deeper.
Well, there you have it. Halle sharing her expertise. So, Halle, where can people contact you in your practice?
You can contact at our office at 719-640-0086. We have a Facebook page, Robert Andrews Medical, and that's out there. We have Instagram. That's a Robert underscore Andrews underscore medical, but we're all over the place. So, you can always look us up online or give us a call.
Okay, awesome. Well, Halle, this was a pleasure. Thanks for coming on. Thank you for sharing your message.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it all the time.
Thanks for listening to the Beauty Talk podcast. Any questions, please contact the practice directly with the contact information provided during the show. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.